A lot of my work is about how power affects people psychologically, how power affects people in their lives, and how power affects individuals and organizations, what it's like to have power and what it's like to not have power, and how this affects people's ways of thinking, their decision-making, and ultimately their behavior and how they treat other people. One of the streams of research that I've been working really hard on over the last couple of years is trying to understand how power affects the capacity to take other people's perspectives, to consider their points of view, and to consider their opinions on issues. And one of the things I've found is that people in positions of high power tend to be less inclined to take other people's perspectives, less inclined to think about how others might think differently from themselves. And this can obviously have an impact on how long they stay in power, how effective their decisions are, and things like that over the long run. So one of the things we're looking at is in Hurricane Katrina, you have people from George Bush all the way down to the victims of Hurricane Katrina, so vast differences in power in this situation. And we look at what they said in response to Hurricane Katrina. And so we take quotations from 4 different media sources in the 10 days following Hurricane Katrina. And we simply look at what they said. We look at features of their speech and see if the power that they had in that situation actually led to systematic differences in the way they described the very same events, the events unfolding after Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf region. So what we find there is that high power individuals are more likely to describe the event in very abstract terms, in more certain terms, more future-oriented terms, and in a more positive light. Whereas if you go all the way down the hierarchy, if you look at the state government officials, you look at the aid providers and the experts in the situation, who you could argue didn't have as much power as the federal government officials, and then all the way down to the victims. As you go down that social hierarchy, folks tend to describe the event in less positive terms or more negative terms, in more past-oriented terms, and in more concrete, detailed terms. And so the idea is that and this is all if you hold the access that they had to information constant. So even if you control for those variables, the position of power predicted how people sort of interpreted and spoke about the event. And we all know that there was an opinion, I think, in the United States that people at different positions of this social hierarchy, this national hierarchy, if you will, described the events in different terms, and it made the victims feel alienated. And so we think about, not just in response to Hurricane Katrina, but organizationally, more broadly, when you have people at different levels of a hierarchy who see the exact same events transpire, but they think about those events in very different terms, and they speak about those events in very different terms, that the sort of likelihood for common communication and understanding up and down the hierarchy is actually pretty limited.